So, good morning everyone. I am Leah Jane and I'm going to tackle about requirements gathering techniques or fact-finding techniques. Requirements gathering techniques is used for building political support for the project and establishing trust and rapport between the project team building the system and the users who ultimately will choose to use or not to use the system. Involving someone in the process implies that the project team views that the person as an important resource and value his or her opinion. Fact-finding techniques are process of collection of data and information based on techniques that contain a sampling of existing documents, research, observation, questionnaires, interviews, prototyping, and joint requirements planning. Sources of requirements. Good requirements start with good sources. Finding those high-quality sources is an important task, unfortunately, one that takes few resources. The primary sources of requirements are the stakeholders, so begin by identifying them from among these candidates. From the customers, users, administrators, maintenance staff, and partners. So, continuation. After you have identified the sources, there are several techniques that you can use to gather requirements. However, it is important to recognize that requirement gathering is an iterative process, and there is no single technique that is universally applicable. Capture requirements and then collaborate with the stakeholders to correct and improve them. So some success tips: do it now, keep it small, and iterate. So we can capture requirements using the following: interview users, joint application development sessions or the JAD, questionnaires, document analysis, observation. So let's go to the first one. Interview is the most commonly used requirement. Requirements gathering. After all, it is natural. So if you need to know something, you usually ask someone. So it is face-to-face contact with users through individual interviews is the primary sources of requirements and an important way to gather and validate their requirements. So there are 5 basic steps in an interview process. The first one is select interviewees, designing interview, preparing the interview, conducting the interview, and the post-interview follow-up. The first one is selecting interviewee. The first step in interviewing is to create an interview schedule listing all the people who will be interviewed, when and for what purpose. The schedule can be informal list that is used to help set up meeting times, or a formal list that is incorporated in the work plan. So this is the example of the interview schedule. So people of different levels of the organization have different perspective on the system. So it is important to include both managers who manage the process and staff who actually perform the process to gain both high-level and low-level perspective on an issue. So here is the name, the position, the purpose of the interview, and the meeting schedule. The second one is designing interview question. There are three types of the interview question: the closed-ended question, the open-ended questions, and the probing questions. Closed-ended questions are those that require a specific answer. They are similar to multiple choice or arithmetic question in an exam. It enables analysts to control the interview and obtain the information needed. In an open-ended questions are designed to gather rich information and give interviewee more control over the information that is revealed during the interview. Probing question is follow up on what has just been discussed in order to learn more, and they often are used when the interview is unclear. So those are the examples. In close-ended question, how many telephone orders are received per day? How do customers place orders? What information is missing from the monthly sales report? So, in an open-ended question, what do you think about the current system? What are some of the problems you face on a daily basis? What are some of the improvements you would like to see in a new system? In probing question, why? Can you give me an example? Can you explain in a bit more details? So in general, an interviewer should not ask questions about information that is readily available from the other sources. So there are two fundamental approaches to organize the interview question: top-down or bottom-up. The top-down interview is interviewer starts with broad, general issues and gradually works toward more specific ones. It is an appropriate strategy for the most interviews. It enables the interviewee to become accustomed to the topic before he or she needs to provide specifics. It is also enable the interviewer to understand the issues before moving to the details. Most important, it enables the interviewee to raise a set of big picture issues before becoming enmeshed with details. The bottom-up interviewer starts with very specific questions and moves to the broad questions. May be preferred when the analyst already has gathered a lot of information about issues and just needs to fill in some holes with details. May be appropriate if lower level staff members feel threatened or unable to answer high level questions. So this is the top-down and bottom-up questioning strategies. So from the top-down, from high level, the very general, to low level or the very specific, while the bottom-up, from low level, which is very specific, to high level or very general. Prepare for the interview. It is important to prepare for the interview in the same way that you will prepare to give a presentation. The interviewer should have a general interview plan, listing the questions to be asked in the appropriate order, should anticipate possible answers and follow up with them, and should identify sequence between related topics. The interviewer should confirm the areas in which the interviewee has knowledge, so as not to ask questions that the interviewee cannot answer. The interviewer should be sure to prepare as well. So when the interview is scheduled, the interviewee should be told the reason for the interview and the areas that will be discussed far enough in advance so that he or she has time to think about the issue and organize his or her thought. The fourth one is conduct the interview. The first goal is to build rapport with the interviewer so that he or she trusts the interviewer and is willing to tell the truth, not just give the answer that he or she thinks relevant. It is critical to carefully record all the information that the interviewee provides. Recording ensures that the interviewer does not miss important points, but it can be intimidating for the interviewee. It is important to understand the issues that are discussed. The interviewer should not be afraid to ask dumb questions because the only thing worse than appearing dumb is to be dumb by understanding something. Jargon should be recognized and defined. Any jargon not understood should be clarified. And fact should be separated from opinion. This suggests that errors are viewed as a very important problem that should be addressed by the news system, even if they are declining. So it is helpful to check the fact because any differences between the fact and the interview's opinions can point out the key areas for improvement. The last one is the post-interview follow-up. So after the interview is over, the analyst needs to prepare an interview report that describes the information from the interview. So this must be the example of the interview report. So there is the name of the interviewee, the interviewer, the purpose of the interview, the summary of all the interviews, and the topics that are discussed between the interview. So now, let's come to the second requirement techniques. It is the joint application development or the JAD. So, JAD is an information gathering techniques that allows the project team users and management to work together to identify the requirements for the system. So, a little history. IBM developed the JAD technique in the late 1970s, and it is often the most useful method for collecting information from users. It can reduce scope creep by 50%, and it prevents the system requirements from being too specific or too vague, both of which cause trouble during later stages of the development process. So JAD is a structured process in which 10 to 20 users meet together under the direction of of a facilitator's group on JAD techniques. So the facilitator is a person who sets the meeting agenda and guides the discussion but does not join the discussion as a participant. He or she must be an expert in both group process techniques and system analysis and design techniques. And 2 or more scribes should assist the facilitator by recording notes, making copies, and so on. So, this is the JAD meeting room. A new form of JAD is called electronic JAD or the eJAD. Attempts to overcome these problems by using a groupware. A groupware is a software designed to facilitate collective working by number of different users. So, in eJAD meeting room, each participant uses special software on a network computer to send anonymous ideas and opinions to everyone else. So, a good JAD approach follows a set of 5 steps. Select participants. So, just like the interview, JAD also need to select a participant. It is done in the same basic way as selecting interview participants. Participants are selected based on the information they can contribute in order to provide a broad mix of organizational levels and build political support for the new system. The facilitator should be someone who is an expert in JAD or eJAD techniques, and ideally, someone who has experience with business under discussion. JAD facilitator is a consultant external to the organization. So, second is design a JAD session. So, this is the JAD meeting room. JAD session usually are designed and structured using the same principles as interviews. JAD sessions are designed to collect specific information from users, and this requires developing a set of questions before the meeting. One difference between JAD and interviewing is that all JAD sessions are structured. They must be carefully planned. In general, close-ended questions are seldom used. Preparing for a JAD session. Session can go beyond the depth of a typical interview and are usually conducted off-site. Participants can be more concerned about how to prepare. It is important that the participant understand what is expected of them. Conducting a JAD session. So most JAD sessions try to follow agenda, and most have formal ground rules that define appropriate behavior. Common ground rules include following the schedule, respecting others' opinion, and accepting disagreement, and ensuring that only one person talks at a time. The role of a JAD facilitator can be challenging. Many participants come to a JAD session with strong feelings about the system to be discussed. Channeling these feelings so that the session moves forward in a positive direction and getting participants to recognize and accept, but not necessarily agree on opinions and situation different from their own requires significant expertise in the system analyst and design and JAD and interpersonal skills. So, JAD facilitator performs the three key functions. First is that he or she ensures that the group sticks to the agenda. The second is he or she must help the group understand the technical terms and jargon that surround the system, the system development process, and help the participants understand the specific analysis techniques used. The third is he or she records the group's input on a public display area, which can be a whiteboard, a flip chart, or a computer display. And he or she structures the information that the group provides and help the group recognize the key issues and important solutions. So the post-JAD follow-up. A JAD post-session report is prepared and circulated among session attendees. The post-session report is essentially the same as interview report. So this one, the JAD post-session report, there should be the person interviewed, the interviewer, the purpose of the interview, the summary of the interview, and the details. So the third requirements gathering techniques is the questionnaires. Questionnaire is a set of written questions used to obtain information from individuals, often used when there is a large number of people from whom information and opinions are needed. So, mostly the questionnaire is like this example. So, a good process to use when using questionnaires follows 4 steps. So the first one is select participants. So identify the individual to whom the questionnaires were designed. The standard approach is to select a subset of people who are representative of an entire group. So after selecting participants, going to designing a questionnaire. Question must be clearly enable the analyst to separate facts from opinions. Opinion questions often ask respondents the extent to which they agree and disagree. Questions should be relatively consistent in style so that the respondent does not have to read instructions for each before answering. So after administering the questionnaire, getting the participant to complete the questionnaire and send it off. So after that, there should always be a follow-up. So questionnaire follow-up, it is helpful to process the returned questionnaires and develop a questionnaire report soon after the questionnaire deadline. This is to ensure that the analysis process proceeds in a timely fashion and that respondent who requested copies of the result received them properly. So, it should be a good questionnaire design. Begin with non-threatening and interesting questions. Group items into logically coherent sections. Do not put important items at the very end of the questionnaire. Do not crowd a page with too many items. Avoid abbreviations. Avoid biased or suggestive items or terms. Number questions to avoid confusion. Pretest the questionnaires to identify confusing questions and provide anonymity to respondents. Next is the document analysis. Project teams often use document analysis to understand the as-is system. Many helpful documents do exist in an organization: paper reports, memorandums, policy manuals, user training manuals, organizational charts, forms, and of course the user interface with the existing system. They represent the formal system that the organization uses. The real or the informal system differs from the formal one, and these differences, particularly large ones, give strong indication of what needs to be changed. So, this is performing a document analysis. So, in this sample, the customer made a mistake. This should be labeled owner's name to prevent confusion. And in the pet's name, the staff had to add additional information about the type of animal and the animal's date of birth. This information should be added to the new form in the to-be system. And the customer did not include area code in the phone number. It should be made more clear. So, observation. The act of watching process being performed is a powerful tool for gathering information about the as-is system because it enables the analyst to see the reality of a situation rather than listening to others describe it in interviews or job interview. It's a good way to check the validity of information gathered from indirect sources such as interviews and questionnaires. The goal is to keep a low profile, to not interrupt those working, and to not influence those being observed. It is often used to supplement interview information. And the location of a person's office and its furnishing give clues to the person's power and influence in the organization can be used to support or refute information given in an interview. So next is the modeling system requirements with use case. So, an introduction to use case modeling. One of the primary challenges is the ability to elicit the correct and necessary system requirements from the stakeholders and specify them in a manner understandable to them so those requirements can be verified and validated. So, according to Fred Groups, The hardest single part of building a software is deciding precisely what to build. No other part of the conceptual work is as difficult as establishing the detailed technical requirements, including all the interfaces to the people, to machine, and to other software systems. So, no other work so cripples the resulting system if done wrong. No other part is more difficult to rectify later. So the user-centered development and use case modeling. So user-centered development is a process of a system's development based on understanding the needs of the stakeholders and the reason why the system should be developed. Use case modeling is a process of modeling a system's functions in terms of business events, who initiated the events, and how the system responds to those events. So use case modeling has roots in object-oriented modeling, gaining popularity in non-object development environment because of its usefulness in communicating with users. Complements traditional modeling tools. So, there is nothing about user-centered development that requires use cases, but employing use cases in requirements analysis is an excellent way to make sure your project begins as a user-centered development. So, the benefits of the use case modeling. Provides tools for capturing functional requirements, assist in decomposing system into manageable pieces, provides means communicating with users or stakeholders concerning system functionality in language they understand, provides means of identifying, assigning, tracking, controlling, and management system development activities, provides aids in estimating project scope, effort, and schedule. So using case modeling encourages user involvement. By the same token, for use cases to be successful, participation by the user is imperative. So, system concepts for use case modeling. So, use case is behaviorally related sequence of steps or scenario, both automated and manual, for the purpose of completing a single business task. Description of system functions from the perspective of external user in terminology they understand. So, a use case diagram is a diagram that depicts the interactions between the system and the external systems and users. Graphically describes who will use the system and in what ways the user expects to interact with the system. And the use case narrative is a textual description of the business event and how the user will interact with the system to accomplish the task. So, a use case diagram and use case narratives are two views of the same of the same sequence of steps that make up a conceptual use case. The use case diagram communicates at a high level the scope of the business events that make up the use case. And use case narrative communicates at a more detailed level exactly how the user interacts with the system. So a use case itself is not considered functional requirement, but the use cases stories scenario consist of one or more requirements. So this one is the example of the use case diagram. So the basic use case symbol. Use case is a subset of all overall system functionality. It is represented by a horizontal ellipse with name of use case above, below, or inside the ellipse. The actor is anyone or anything that needs to interact with the system to exchange information. It could be a human, organization, another information system, external device, or even the time. Temporal event is a system event triggered by time. The actor time. So this is the use case symbol and the actor symbol. So there are 4 types of actors. The primary business actor. It is the stakeholder that primarily benefits from the execution of the use case. Example is the employee receiving the paycheck. So the primary system actor is the stakeholder that directly interfaces with the system to initiate or trigger the business or the system event. Example is the bank teller entering the deposit information. So the external server actor is the stakeholder that responds to a request from the use case. Example is the credit bureau authorizing a credit card charge. The external receiver actor is the stakeholder that is not primary actor but receives something of value from the use case. Example is the warehouse receiving a packing slip. So the use case So the next is the use case association relationship. Association is a relationship between an actor and a use case in which an interaction occurs between them. Association modeled as a solid line connecting the actor and the use case. It is with an arrowhead. Touching the use case indicates that the use case was initiated by the actor. And it is lacking arrowhead indicates receiver actor. It may be bidirectional or unidirectional. So, example with this one. So, from a club member with an arrowhead to a place new member order, and the distribution center is the receiver actor. So most of the use case diagram in this chapter only show the primary system actor. This one also show the external receiver actor. Use cases can be drawn to show some or all the actor. The use case extends relationship. Extension use case is consisting of 4 steps extracted from another use case to simplify the region. Extend the functionality of the original use case, generally not identified in the requirements phase. Extends relationship represented as arrow beginning at the extension use case and pointing to use case it is extending, and it is labeled as extend. So example with this one. So from the generate warehouse packing order will extend to place new member order, and the calculate order sum total and sales staff will also extend to place the new member order. So, an extension use case is employed to simplify another use case. An extension use case may have an extends relationship to one or more other use cases. So, the use case uses relationship. It is an abstract use case that reduces redundancy in 2 or more other use cases by combining common steps found in both. Available by any other use case that requires its functionality. Generally not identified in requirements phase. Relationship between abstract use case and use case that uses it is called uses or includes relationship. The fact that as arrow beginning and original use case and pointing to use case it is using, and it is labeled by uses. So this one. So place new order member is to submit the change of a postal new address. So it is need. So the abstract use case is to revise the postal address. So use case depends on relationship. Depends on use case relationship that specifies which other use cases must be performed before the current use case. It can help determine sequence in which use cases need to be developed. Depicted as arrow beginning and one use case and pointing to use case it depends on, and it labeled as depends on. So this one. So identifying use case dependencies is it is useful when using build cycles to build the system in successive versions. So in this one, so the make deposit use case is depends on establish a bank account, and make a withdrawal will depends on making a deposit. Use case inheritance relationship. Inheritance, a use case relationship in which the common behavior of two actors initiating the same use case is extrapolated and assigned to a new abstract actor to reduce redundancy. Other actors can inherit the interaction of the abstract actor, depicted as an arrow beginning to one actor and pointing to the abstract actor whose interaction the first actor inherits. So, like this one. So this is the example of the use case inheritance relationship. The process of requirements use case modeling. Objective is to elicit and analyze enough requirements information to prepare a model that communicates what is required from a user perspective, is free of specific details about how system will be implemented. To effectively estimate and schedule project may need to include preliminary implementation assumption. So the step is identify the business actors, identify business use cases, construct use case model diagram, document business requirements, use case narrative. So the individual steps will be discussed on the next slide. So the step 1 is identify the business actors. When looking for actors, ask the following question: who or what provides inputs to the system? Who or what receive outputs from the system? Are interfaces required to the other system? Are there events that are automatically triggered at a predetermined time? Who will maintain information in the system? So, actors should be named with a noun or a noun phrase. Sample list of actors. So, term can be potential member, club member, past member, marketing member, member services. So its scene names could be a member or inactive member, warehouse. As for distribution center and its descriptions. So step 2 is to identify by focusing first on actors, you concentrate on how the system will be used instead of how it will be built. Focusing on actors help refine and further define the scope and boundaries of the system. And also by first identifying actors, you can find candidates to interview and observe so you can develop and validate the use cases. So the step 2 is identify business requirement use cases. Business requirements use case is a use case created during requirements analysis to capture the interaction between a user and the system free of technology and implementation details. During the requirements analysis, strive to identify and document only the most critical, complex, and important use cases, often called the essential use case. So, when looking for a use cases, ask the following question. What are the main tasks of the actor? What information does the actor need from the system? What information does the actor provide to the system? Does the system need to inform the actor of any changes or events that have occurred? Does the actor need to inform the system of any changes or events that have occurred? Use cases should be named with a verb phrase specifying the goal of the actor. Example is the submit subscription order. So this could be an example of sample context diagram. So this could be the actor, in a square, and the use case could be this promotion, the member order, the name between this arrow. So the use case glossary. So submit subscription order. So this will be the glossary of the sample use case from the previous slide. So the step 3 is construct use case model diagram. So this one, to make it a little short and not, and to understand the diagram, use cases have been grouped into business subsystems. This is the key to defining your development strategy. Which use cases will be developed first and by whom? So the use case diagram. So the fourth step is document business requirements, use case narratives. Document first at high level to quickly obtain an understanding of the events and magnitude of the system. Then expand to a fully documented business requirement narrative and include the use case's typical course of events and its alternate courses. Okay. So So this is a sample of high-level version of the use case narrative. So the author okay. So in the author, number 1, it is the person who wrote the use case and provide a point of contact for anyone requiring additional information. So there should be a date the use case was last modified, the version that anyone the current version of the use case, and then the use case name should represent the goal that the use case is trying to accomplish. It should begin with a verb. So the use case type is the business requirements. Use cases provide a general understanding of the problem domain and scope, but don't include data to communicate to developers what the system should do. So this is a sample expanded version of a use case narrative. So this is a precondition, a constraint on the state of the system before the use case can be executed. The event that initiates the use case. So use cases and project management. Use case model can drive entire development effort. Project manager or system analyst system analysis uses business requirements, use cases to estimate and schedule the build cycles of the project. Build cycles are scoped on the basis of the importance of the use case and the time it takes to implement the use case. To determine the importance of the use cases, we'll create the use case ranking and evaluation matrix. The use case dependency diagram. The use case ranking and priority matrix. So, in most projects, the most important use case are developed first. So, use case ranking and priority matrix is a tool used to evaluate use cases and determine their priority. Evaluates use cases on 1 to 5 scale against 6 criteria. First one is significant, the impact on the architectural design. Easy to implement but contains significant functionality. Includes risky, time-critical, or complex function. Involves significant research or new risky technology. Includes primary business function. It will increase revenue or decrease cost. So, this is the sample use case ranking and priority matrix. So, in this one, the use case name is this submit this subscription order. So, in the ranking criteria, you can give at least 1 to 5 points. So, should total all the score, and then it should be prioritized and build cycle. The use case dependency diagram. Use case dependency diagram is a graphical depiction of the dependencies among use cases. Provide the following benefits: graphical depiction of the systems, events, and their states enhances understanding of system functionality. Helps identify missing use cases. Helps facilitate project management by depicting which use cases are more critical. The sample use case dependency. So, this is the make product inquiry. So from generate daily 10, 30, 60 day default agreement will depends on submit subscription order. So from a revised order, it will depend on the place you order, then to submit subscription order, then to establish a new member subscription program. So that's all. Thank you.